Well, good morning. Welcome to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. It's Wednesday, the 12th of January. It's a lovely, lovely sunny day outside at the moment here in London in the middle of winter. And I've got a fairly packed show for you once again. We have stories about Humberside Police, who seized 230 bikes last year. How the shift to EVs could cost the Treasury 5 billion in lost fuel duty. An e-scooter rider who's seeking compensation after a collision with a bus. We will be looking at the latest manufacturer to launch an e-scooter, who is actually Bugatti. The Arc Vector, an electric motorcycle, edges closer to release. We have a date for the Northwest 200. We'll be looking at the world's first cyber secure bike and an app called Spoke, which is said to connect your bike to the Internet of Things. And finally, today's talking point. We'll get there eventually. Is it safe to build a bike that can only lean to 30 degrees? So all that and more. While we crack on with the show, we have John saying good morning. Hi, John, and Nigel saying good morning to me and everybody out there. Good to have you along, guys. Right, so first story then of the day. Well, in just 12 months, the police in North Humberside, Humberside, actually, I've got North Lincolnshire, Humberside. They have had an operation running called Operation Yellowfin. They do come up with some wonderful names, don't they? And they have seized no less than 260 plus motorbikes, quads, and scooters across the North Links area. And this is all in response to local residents sharing their concern and worries about motorcycle related crime and antisocial riding. So there we have a photograph of some of the bikes that they have apparently seized. They have brought in North Lincolnshire something called a public space protection order, and these actually prohibit nuisance riding by motorcyclists and quad bike riders, and also car drivers, it has to be said. And one of the things that the operation has done is it's attempted to find long-term solutions to the issues, which they say is installing CCTV cameras in problem areas, enabling them to identify the culprits. And if people don't comply with the orders, the fines go up to £1,000, and court proceedings can follow if you don't pay the fine. Okay, all sounds all well and good if you're into policing. Neighbourhood Police Superintendent Paul French said, whilst the last 12 months have been extremely positive, prevention remains key. And they say our local neighbourhood policing teams will continue to be out ensuring we're listening to local residents, engaging with local communities to address any concerns. And he goes on to say they'll be proactive in dealing reactively with reports of this type of behaviour, but they also remain persistent in gathering and developing information intelligence about those offending. So it helps them to deal with those involved. And cause harm to local communities. The behaviour is not acceptable, will not be tolerated. It's kind of one of those problem areas, isn't it, where you have to say, rather than just saying, let's stop people doing what they're doing, why not ask some questions about why they're doing it? I have talked in recent shows about some schemes that are being set up to actually build some off-road riding areas where people can use bikes like this legally. But at least tacked on to the end of the press release was an acceptance that it's not these riders are not representative of the ordinary biker, because we all tend to get tarred with the same brush, frankly, when it comes to antisocial riding. And Superintendent French did actually say, as part of this work, we're engaging with those who are riding motorcycles in accordance with the law, and I would like to thank both them and our wider communities for their support. So at least they are acknowledging that it is a fringe element on two wheels. Guy's also looked in. Good morning to you, Guy. Don't forget, you are tuned to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills, and we go live at 11. And that was the wrong button. What I meant to press was this one here. Goes out 11 on Wednesdays and Sundays, nearly always live, very occasionally a recorded show. And you can always catch up here on Facebook or over on YouTube when I post the video up there later in the morning. Right, okay. What next? Well, ever since the government started to hand out incentives to buyers to switch to electric vehicles, and people started telling us how cheap they were to run because electricity costs less than petrol diesel, I've been saying that it's an advantage that's unlikely to last. And right now, a new report suggests that the income that the Treasury receives from fuel-related duty could drop by almost a third over the next 8 years as the pace of the switch to EVs actually accelerates. Now, around 2 million or so new cars are sold annually in the UK. 2020 was obviously a bit of a blip due to COVID. But the noteworthy stat is that EV sales almost doubled in 2021, up 6.6% from 6.6% in 2020 to nearly 12% of the total new cars sold last year. Now, as the corresponding numbers of internal combustion engine vehicles are scrapped, the RAC Foundation have crunched the numbers, and they show that the annual fuel duty income from petrol and diesel could drop from 16.4 million, that's the 2019 figure, to just 11.4 billion by 2028. Now, to put that in perspective, the RAC Foundation points out that the missing 5 billion would be roughly what would be spent on operating, maintaining, and enhancing motorways and major A roads in England each year. And currently, just under 60p of the cost of a litre of diesel and petrol is fuel duty. There is, of course, VAT on top of the whole lot. The RAC Foundation Director, Steve Goulding, he said that the government must soon decide how and where they are going to plug the fiscal hole that electrification will inevitably cause. Now, one option would be to move to greener vehicles, and speed that move by actually raising fuel duty and other motoring taxes for the remaining ICE vehicles. One of the easiest ways to do that, of course, is to up the vehicle excise duty. If you have a unfortunately older, more polluting vehicle like my camper, it's very, very expensive indeed just to pay the vehicle excise duty. But as the RAC points out, that would hit poorest motorists hardest because they are the ones who tend to cling on to older vehicles. Now, so another possibility is road pricing, which will involve people paying based on distance, time, location, where they drive, basically. But the RAC say this would be complicated. I'm not sure about that, but it would certainly require infrastructure that's not currently in place, whether that's the sort of autoroute style toll booths, which you see in France. The more modern electronic tags, they have those on French autoroutes too, and you can use them on things like the Dartford Tunnel, or CCTV-based charging zones where your number plate is clocked by a camera every time you drive past a particular location. We've got those, of course, in many city centres now. The other possibility, and one I think is likely, is actually the compulsory installation of smart meters in homes and workplaces. Now, since July 2019, the government's Office for Zero Emissions Vehicles has actually limited the grant for home wall box installation for people who are fitting these smart chargers. Now, right now, we tend to only hear about the benefits of smart chargers, such as the fact that EVs can be charged on cheap electricity at night if you plug them in via a smart charger. But something I reported back in September is that energy firms actually want the right to switch off electric car charging, which implies that the technology to identify the fact there is a smart car or an electric car plugged into the smart box is already there. So if that's already in place, then I can't see how difficult it would be to actually, again, detect the EV when it's plugged in and actually switch to a higher tariff for the electricity filling up the car. And then, of course, the money is simply collected by the utility company and passed on to the government. And that has the advantage, of course, that the costs are therefore borne by the consumer who has to pay for the box and the electricity company who has to process the money and pay the relevant amount out to the exchequer. What I am sure will not happen is what the RAC says, that the government could choose to regard a drop in yield from motoring taxation as the price to be paid for saving the planet. Budgets need to balance, and EVs need well-maintained roads as much as a gas-guzzling Range Rover. Okay. Don't forget, if you have any comments, any questions on any of the items, drop me a line in the comments and I will get back to you if possible during the show. If I can't manage it during the show, I will answer you after the show at some point. And if you've got any feedback, I'm always interested to hear that too. Right, so next story. An e-scooter rider is seeking compensation after a crash involving a London bus in which he suffered serious injuries. Now, the man who suffered chest injuries, which were then complicated by pneumonia, required an extended hospital stay, and he also has limited arm movement and complains of chest pain after the crash. So his team of solicitors are now seeking tens of thousands of pounds in compensation from the bus company's insurers. And it is actually set to be a test case because there are estimated to be around 750,000 e-scooters being used on public roads, which are privately owned and therefore illegal. Now, since their use on the road is strictly illegal, the case will determine whether or not riders of these machines can actually sue a motorist or a motorcyclist for that matter after a collision, even if they can prove the fault of the driver involved. Now, the man who was in his 50s, so no youngster, was reportedly clipped by the wing mirror of a bus as it overtook him last summer. And he says he was wearing a high-vis jacket and a helmet when the collision happened. And his legal team say that he took reasonable precautions and was riding his e-scooter safely. They say if he'd been riding a bicycle instead, it's likely he would have suffered similar injuries. Why should his claim for compensation be any less valid than a cyclist's claim? The statement continued by saying the case showed there are a lack of adequate laws to keep people safe when it comes to e-scooter riders on the roads. We hope this case will give some clarity to the legal position for those injured in e-scooter accidents where the privately owned e-scooter was being ridden on a public road. And they conclude by saying we really need new urgent legislation. We're calling on the government to implement laws to make e-scooters safer for riders and road users and to enable injured people to access compensation. Now, I'm no legal expert, but I would have thought that a law that bans the private use of e-scooters on public roads was actually pretty clear. Now, following on from that particular story, most people blame the sort of pile 'em high, sell 'em cheap retailers for flogging cheap e-scooters from China for the current problem of these unlicensed illegal bikes, and they will almost certainly make up the majority of the sales. But it hasn't stopped some of the best known automotive manufacturers from actually jumping on the bandwagon. Have a look at this one here, if I can actually get the picture up. There we go. MV Agusta are selling their own badged up e-scooter, apparently capable of 25 miles an hour. But if you zoom in on the little logo on the front of this one, you'll see that it belongs to a well-known car manufacturer. So this one here has got a top speed of about 18 miles an hour. And here's the really cool bit. As you zip past all the riders on those slower legal e-scooters, you can tell them you're on a Bugatti because the bike projects the Bugatti logo onto the road surface behind it, just so that they are absolutely certain who's just overtaken them. Right, so if you enjoy the show, don't forget you can pop over to my coffee page, buy me a coffee. £3 will get you access as well to a month's time to browse all my hundreds of better biking articles over there as well. Currently over 800 at the moment, so I would say well worth 300p. In the legal but still waiting to see it corner is the Arc Vector. Now, at least this bike appears to be real. And this seems to me to be a real photograph, unlike the realistic renders that we are frequently seeing of bikes that are in development. If you look at it closely, I'll try and zoom in again, you'll see that the front tyre there appears to be firstly wet, and B appears to have a moulding line across it. So I'm fairly confident this is actually a real motorcycle, unlike most of the ones that we see fairly regularly, which are clearly not actually yet in production. Well, not even in production, not even yet built. So the word is that a production-ready fleet of these bikes are actually in the hands of development riders in Spain, and they are preparing to get the machine homologated. So if true, and the photo at least suggests that the bike's capable of being ridden, that puts the Arc Vector some distance ahead of the Canadian Damon Hypersport I talked about the other day, which remains rather elusive in real life. Despite claims of thousands of sales, not a single Damon has yet been seen by an independent observer, let alone prospective owners. The Arc Vector's path hasn't been smooth, unlike the walnut veneer on the tank. The brainchild of former Land Rover Jaguar engineer Mark Truman, the machine first appeared in 2018, and he said his mission was not just to electrify motorcycles, but to explore what an electric performance motorcycle could be. And the aim was to put the bike on the road by 2020. Now, as one report put it, one of the answers to that question was actually really hard to bring to the market, as investment funding failed and led to bankruptcy in late 2019. Now, Truman bought the company's assets back himself in 2021 and recently told Motorcycle News the project is back on track and the first owners should get their bikes before the end of 2022. The bolt-on bits are the usual array of Öhlins, Brembo and so on. The trick bits include the Arc Zenith helmet, which houses a heads-up display for a rear-view camera, and you also get clothing with haptic feedback. Basically, when a vehicle enters your blind spot, then the jacket buzzes in the appropriate direction. The questions lie, as ever, with electric bikes on the power, speed, range conundrum. The bike's speed limited to 124 miles per hour. Arc claimed, however, a range of 271 miles from the 16.8 kilowatt hour battery. Now, given that the 14.4 kilowatt hour battery would have pushed the Zero I test rode a few years ago around 100 miles before it ran out of juice, that's a pretty big claim. It's more than twice the range per kilowatt hour. Another claim which I would like to see in real life is that it can go from empty to full in 40 minutes with their fast charging system. We'll see, of course, when the first bikes arrive, hopefully late this year, as I said. Currently, prices are around £90,000 as a starting point. And I don't even want to guess how much the limited edition that will be launching later this year will set you back. Right, rather cheaper if you want a day out is the Northwest 200, which is back in the calendar for 2022 after 2 years of cancellations for COVID, of course. The racing event has been confirmed for May 8th to the 14th. So that is the Northwest 200 back on in Northern Ireland, and I'll certainly look forward to seeing that on the telly. I doubt I'll actually get there for real, but one day maybe, one day I will hopefully get there. Right, okay, so This bike here is not nearly so exciting to look at as the um, Arc that we've just seen. It's the NUUK Cargo Pro electric motorcycle. So it's another one of these sort of little utility bikes. But it's not just any old utility electric bike. It's actually according to the manufacturer, the world's first cyber secure bike. Um, NUUK, based in Spain, up in the Biscay region. And as you can see, it comes with a big bolt-on rack at the back, and you can get a large trunk for that too. Other additions include screens and foot plates rather than just the footrest. So the aims are clearly to make a practical delivery bike. The twin 2.4 kilowatt hour batteries appear to be fixed, but the charging cable with a domestic plug allows full charging in 4.5 hours. It's a modest 6 kilowatt power output, which is about 8 horsepower. So it's A1 license compliant, and it gets you to a maximum speed of about 90 kph, 55 mph, which is plenty for around town, of course. And the range is claimed to be about 120 kilometers or 75 miles of efficient driving, falling to around 100k, 60 miles roughly, of normal driving. Brakes are disc front and rear, no regenerative braking, just 150 kilograms in weight, which is around about 330 pounds. So it should be very manageable for the job it's planned to do. But the real reason I popped that bike in was because it's said to be cyber secure. Now, in case you're wondering, cybersecurity uses technologies, processes, and controls to protect interconnected systems from attacks. That's one definition I found online. It's not a trivial problem. Cyber attacks continue to grow in sophistication, and attackers are using an ever-expanding range of tactics. The cost to the world economy is estimated to be 750 billion each year. And it would be a mistake to assume that we're of no interest to cyber attackers, and that only big companies and governments need to worry. Anybody who uses any device connected to another needs to consider their cyber security. Now, a frequently used method to get into an otherwise secure system is to find a back door. And that's basically a poorly secured device which connects via the internet or Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. So, for example, used keyless security on a car. Well, that uses a connection which is wireless between the key and the car, and thousands have been stolen because the key code has been captured and the car is simply unlocked with a fake electronic key, and the vehicle can be driven away. If you've got a Bluetooth intercom connected to your helmet, now in theory at least, it would be possible to hack the intercom to gain access to the phone, and then you could access anything from calendars and contact lists to photos, emails, and text messages, and, in theory at least, the banking app. Now, the FBI estimates that 75% of Americans used mobile banking in some form in 2019. And thanks to COVID, that figure has risen, or the amount of access online has actually risen by 50% since 2020. So think about some of the things that have proven insecure recently. Doorbells with wireless cameras. You've got heating that comes on when you leave work. You've got water filters that reorder filters for you. Fridges that monitor what you're eating. This latest technology is all designed to make life easier for the user, but if it's not nailed down, of course, it makes life easier for the hacker too. And the latest bit of must-fit technology being delivered by bike manufacturers is the Bluetooth connected app, the sort of thing that delivers GPS mapping on your built-in display on the bike, or maybe it allows you to tweak some of the bike's features, or maybe it just shows information about the bike, such as a battery state on your phone. Now, some of the suggestions for vulnerabilities may seem a little bit far-fetched. One regularly touted scary story is that a hacker could, sort of interfere with the brakes and slam the brakes on. But another, which again, it may seem a bit far-fetched, but if the hacker could take control of the routing system, maybe the rider could be routed to a fake destination, in order to have the bike hijacked. If it's possible, someone will try it. The Some of the latest security systems also operate via Bluetooth as soon as your phone is out of range. So that's again something which could be attacked. Now, there is legislation in place. It's the UNECE slash R155. If you're interested, to test how well a vehicle is protected from cyber attack. There are 3 levels that it tests. The first is physical access. So, could a vehicle be hacked via the vehicle's onboard diagnostics port or a USB port? A remote access check looks at the wireless systems, the Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and keyless stop-start that I've just talked about. And the third looks for vulnerabilities in applications built into the vehicle's operating system. So that would be things like the onboard media player, I guess. The weak point would always be the apps that people actually download to their phone and then connect to the car itself. And there must be a barrier against hacking in via a malicious app. So the standards, United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, that's what UNECE actually stands for, and all vehicles ready for sale in the EU and the rest of Europe from July 2022, as they become newly homologated after that date, they will have to be cyber secure, and that's not very far away. And so I was surprised to discover that that Cargo Pro electric bike I just showed you is actually the first vehicle to pass that test. Now I'm running out of time a little bit here, but we'll crack on. Just to give you a flavour of the technology that will connect vehicles, there's a system called Spoke has just come out. Now, Spoke, according to their mission statement, is about transforming road safety and rider connectivity by delivering the first connected ecosystem for the vulnerable road user to deliver contextual awareness and insight for each moment of the journey. Now, to translate the marketing blurb, basically what they have done is they've taken the well-worn explanation for collisions between cars and two-wheelers, I didn't see it, and then added hardware, which would include onboard cameras, displays, video, lights, and other equipment, which will allow the vehicles to talk to each other. So in concept, it looks, whoops, that's the wrong picture. Come on, where's my picture gone? Like this. So if we look first at the car, you'll see that the idea is that you get a warning on the dashboard. Let me get the picture up. I'll get it up in a minute. There it is. You get a warning on the dashboard in your navigation system that tells you that there's a bicycle somewhere in front. If you're on the bicycle, by contrast, then you will get a similar warning that there is a car somewhere behind you. It says vehicle behind. It's a bit blurry, but that's what it actually says there. Okay, so we get this sort of interconnected system where each of the two vehicles talk to each other, and of course on top of that the hardware will do all the usual route navigation, and if you're on the bicycle, it will give you your sort of basic cycling data as well. So they're all delivered through the Spoke app, through integration, it says, with the vehicle's existing systems, or through syncing with existing third-party apps. And that should give you some idea of the level of vulnerability that these systems have. Spoke can lock down their own vehicle-to-vehicle data transmission, but if the rider's using a phone screen to receive apps, what if the phone is hacked? So basically, all of this stuff opens up a whole new level of potential attack, and that's why we are having these cyber secure vehicles delivered to us. All right, okay. So, don't forget, if you want something to read beyond and above what I'm talking about today on my website, do come over and have a look at my Lulu Spotlight page there, Survival Skills. Don't forget the capital S's. For some reason, it requires those two capital S's for you to find the link. Full-length books over there, paperbacks for you to read, as well as some e-books as well. It's good time now to start thinking about your riding, as the spring isn't too far away. There is light at the end of the winter tunnel. Right, now on to the final point today, my talking point. The website rideapart.com. Now they're quite pleased with themselves because they have solved a bit of a puzzle over a new Indian motorcycle model. They explain that there's a new 2022 lineup that was revealed in November last year. The Indian Scout, the Scout Bobber, the Scout 60, the Scout Bobber 60, and the Scout Bobber 20. But they found a trademark application to register the name Rogue. And now, thanks to new vehicle identification number data gleaned from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the NHTSA, over in the US, they say that the Rogue will be based on the Scout Bobber chassis. Now, to be frank, I'm not really interested in the Indian range. The whole cruiser thing's never appealed to me. But the issue I discovered when riding a Harley Cruiser some years ago was the ease with which various bits of the bike actually hit the deck under fairly modest cornering. Now, okay, everything that touched down did seem to fold up out of the way, but I did have to recalibrate my cornering progress somewhat. Now, mentioning this to a Cruiser fan, I was told, well, you just have to change your riding style. And I thought about that, and basically, the problem is my style doesn't change the roads, and this is what came to mind again as I read this Ride Apart report. They said, and I quote, "Compared to the standard Scout, the Bobber trim delivers the same 4.7 inches of travel at the front, but reduces the rear wheel travel to 2 inches. So that'll be comfortable then. But the crucial bit is, as a result, ground clearance decreases from 5.7 inches to 5.1 inches, and the lean angle drops from 31 degrees to 29 degrees. Now, what does 30 degrees look like? Well, this is what it looks like. That's a protractor, and vertically upwards is the 90, and the line's drawn through 60, so that is 30 degrees of lean. At 30 degrees of lean, you will be dragging bits of the undercarriage on this particular motorcycle. Now, 30 degrees of lean is pretty poor. 29 is slightly worse. Why do we need so little lean on a motorcycle? Well, you know, in his book, The Upper Half of the Motorcycle, the author Bernd Spiegel, he claims that animals have develops an internal program that limits their lean angle to 20 degrees. And he produced some evidence. He produced a photograph of a running cow, horses, and naturally enough, a human. And he claims it's a natural barrier to leaning on a motorcycle. Now, if that is the case, then that 30 degrees of lean angle would be plenty. We'd actually have 10 degrees in hand. But do we actually have this natural barrier? Well, frankly, I doubt that very much. Another rider said it's about the point at which we start to lose grip on grass or dirt, and that's why we don't want to lean over further. Well, that makes a little bit more sense, but honestly, it didn't take me very long to find this photo here. Let me just get that up on screen for you. There you are. That's a cheetah. And as you can see, it's cornering at something in excess of 50 degrees of lean, and it seems to have enough grip to achieve that. So I'm not sure that there is this sort of inbuilt animal limit to cornering. And if you dig out some photos of speed skaters, you'll see them leaning at even more extreme angles. So I suspect basically the 20-degree limit, if there ever was one, is more to do with the forces involved in changing direction and the muscular power needed to make that change. Now, I don't know if you watch American football, but I do. But the running backs in the game, they pick the ball up behind the line of scrimmage and they run towards the opposing team. So they carry the ball forward, not just by sort of acceleration, but also by swerving. And whilst they may not lean as far as a speed skater, they are short and relatively powerfully built, rather like the cheetah, in fact. And that gives us a clue about changing direction. The stronger the you are, check out the average speed skater's physique, and the easier it is to change direction over a short distance. And just like a motorcycle turning on a tight circle, we need more lean if we corner at the same speed. So what actually limits this on a bike? Well, I don't think it's anything to do with actually reaching any kind of internal tilt angle, as that cheetah shows us that it can quite happily exceed that 20-degree line. But there are some mental blocks. Now, firstly, it's fear of dropping the bike. Sit on the average motorcycle, lean it to the side, and you really can't lean it far for the weight of the bike trying to topple sideways due to gravity. It reaches the limit of what you can physically hold up. The heavier the bike, the less physically strong we are, the less we can lean it before we drop it. And it's also bike dynamics. Bikes balance themselves. Once rolling at anything much over 10 miles an hour, they'll quite happily go away and balance in a straight line, and they'll turn easily. But novices struggle with the idea that the best way to make a tighter turn is not to slow down. And that makes, of course, the bike lose its dynamic balance. The answer is, of course, to lean over more, but that comes up against that fear of dropping the static bike. But I think there's a third factor involved here. Come back to the cheetah again. Look at its head. Look at its eyes. They are almost level despite the extreme lean angle of the body. And check out Speed Skater. There we go. Once again, eyes level, even though the body is leaning there, probably round about 40 degrees. Now, that does take some time to learn. Getting used to the idea that we tilt our head whilst leaning our body into a corner. And a lot of riders at novice level certainly do have problems with keeping their eyes level as they turn. And the interesting thing is that when riders do get used to the idea of bending their necks as they look into the corner, they seem to free up some of their cornering ability. So I don't think it's any kind of I think it's this physical disorientation caused by leaning your eyes as you turn into a corner, which has a lot to do with this. Now, how much do we actually lean on the bike? Well, for what it's worth, I had an app on the phone for a few days a couple of years ago, just to test it out. And one of the things it measured was my own lean angle on the road. Now, typically, it was actually between 25 and 30 degrees, with odd moments exceeding 35. Now, that's during extreme riding, and that's nothing extreme. It was certainly nowhere near the edge of the tyres. I checked the chicken strips at the end, and there was plenty of lean angle on the tyres left. But I would have hit the limits of that Indian bobber well before I hit my own limits. So it's not just riding style, as I said earlier. It's the road, and the road requires some margins for error. I'm not quite sure what the maximum lean angle on the XJ6 is. I didn't have the phone on the bike when I touched the pegs and even just a little chink from the centre stand as it went down around the Druid's hairpin at Brands. But at my typical lean angle on the road, let's say 30 degrees, I still have 15 degrees of lean to spare. And I know I can lean the bike over to 35 degrees without any problem at all. And even then, I still have 10 degrees of lean angle to go. So that's plenty to tighten my line around the corner. I just simply wouldn't have that area with that bobber. And I have to say, frankly, that bothers me. I'm amazed that a bike can go into production and pass homologation tests when, in my opinion, at least, it's totally compromised in the handling department. And why is it limited to 29 degrees of lean? The answer is simply to create the bum on the tarmac riding position, where the seat height is a mere 25.6 inches above the ground. So, style, definitely, I think so. Right, we have Nick saying good morning. He and Guy has also looked in this morning. Well, that's it all for today, folks. I hope you've enjoyed today's show. Just one date for the diary. Don't forget, Wednesday, the 2nd of February is the next Science of Being Seen. Don't forget, it's also an in-depth presentation as opposed to the whole of the talk, and I'll be focusing on how the human eye detects objects in the visual field. And it's not a case of looking and seeing. There's much more to it than that. After that, March's talk, I've decided it will be on group riding actually. And one final thing, don't forget, if you're looking to think about a course for the new year that's on the nice weather when it arrives, you can still buy my gift vouchers. They're available till the end of next month. So that is it for today. Thank you very much indeed for tuning in. I hope that we'll see you on Sunday for the next show. And if you're out there riding this week, take it easy and stay shiny.